So again, I'm very pleased to present today's panelists, which are Yelda, Yucel, Ozge, Izdes, and Clemencia Muñoz-Tamayo. Yelda is an associate professor of economics in Istanbul Bilgi University. She worked as an economist in economic research and strategic planning and research departments of Yapı Kredi Bank between 1997 and 2009. She has publications about economic crisis, labor markets, economics of gender, and gender-responsive budgeting in national and international journals and books. She also was a researcher in the project Public Policies, Local Governments, Gender Budgeting, Women-Friendly Cities, a Case for Turkey, during 2013 and 2014. Recently, she participated in the preparation of the course materials for Gender and Economics for UN Women. Ozge holds a BS and an MSc degree in economics from Istanbul University in Turkey, and she received her PhD degree in economics from University of Utah, USA. Ozge currently works in Istanbul University as an assistant professor of economics in the International Trade Department, and she is also affiliated instructor of the Gender Studies program of the Women's Studies Center at Istanbul University. Her fields of specialization are macroeconomics, gender and economic development, labor economics. Her publications are mostly on economic crisis and labor market, feminist economics, employment-oriented policies, and poverty. Clemencia has been chief of UN Women Training Center since 2011, and she has more than 20 years experience in the field of international development, gender equality, and women's rights, having worked in different UN organizations. Clemencia is specialized in international relations at Johns Hopkins University, organizational development at MIT, and public social policy at Universidad Iberoamericana de México. So, without further ado, I will leave the floor to Yelda. So, Yelda, please feel free to start the presentation.
Hi, Leticia. I think Ozge will start, so let's give the mic to Ozge.
Yes, apologies. Ozge, can you hear us?
Yes.
Are you there? Okay.
Yes,
Please feel free to start.
We'll start with what is economics, and we'll move on to what is feminist economics from here. Economics is the study of the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. It looks at how people make economic decisions, how they interact in the economic sphere, and the general trends in economic indicators. Mainstream economics, which is also called neoclassical economics, defines economics as the study of how to allocate scarce resources in the most efficient manner in order to satisfy endless human needs and desires. This definition is a narrow one and is also problematic since it is based on the assumption that resources are limited, human needs and wants are endless, and therefore the most important question in economics is defined as the efficiency problem. The mainstream economics claims that supposedly scarce resources should be allocated in the most efficient manner given competing claims on their use. It claims that the main issue of economics is to explain the trade-offs people face in allocating their limited resources, and they need to choose between alternatives. The centrality of question of choice defines the choice theoretical framework of the neoclassical economics. The critical alternative approaches, however, focus on structural constraints that determine economic outcomes and focus on issues of distribution and justice as equally important issues as efficiency. Next slide, please. The objective of feminist economics is to restructure economics in terms of its assumptions, subject matter, methodology, and objectives to build in a gender-aware perspective. Feminist economics asserts that being a woman or a man determines how one participates in the economy and how one is impacted by economic policy. Consequently, the focal argument of feminist economists is that no economic theory or policy is gender neutral. By engendering economics, feminist economists are transforming the discipline into one that embraces all equally. Next slide, please. Leticia, can we move on to next slide, please? And in this regard, feminist economics redefines the economic sphere and incorporates caring and unpaid labor as fundamental economic activities. Feminist economics also redefines the objective of economics and considers human well-being as the measure of economic success. Underlines the role of social hierarchies and thinks about questions of power and unequal access to power as part of the analysis. Moreover, feminist economists accept ethical judgments as valid and inescapable part of economic analysis. Feminist economics applies intersectional analysis in terms of differences such as class, race, ethnicity, caste, and other factors, as well as interactions in between these. Next slide, please. Can we move on to next slide, please? The circular flow diagram is a simplified depiction of the economy presented in standard neoclassical mainstream textbooks. In this circular flow diagram, there are two groups of agents, households and businesses. Households consist of individuals who own and supply factors of production in the factors market to earn money income from businesses. And businesses demand factors of production in the factors market and use them in production. They sell their goods and services at the product market to consumer households who spend their factor income to satisfy needs. The outer flow in the diagram, with green arrows, shows the monetary elements of the exchanges, whereas the inner stream in red illustrates the flow of goods and services and factors of production. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Reproduction occurring within the household is the prerequisite of production, and yet it is traditionally left out of the circular flow of the economic sphere. Feminist economists dealt with this absence by drawing attention to the reproduction sphere. The term unpaid care work addresses the fact that, unlike the care provided by the public, private sector, or NGOs, women's care work is unremunerated despite requiring considerable time and energy. The conventional circular flow of the economy, as we saw in the previous slide, refers to the movement between households and firms of factors of production and products in exchange for income and revenues. This vision treats labor like the other factors of production and neglects the reality that labor needs the goods and services bought from the market to be processed for its reproduction. Alson and Keklik reimagined the economy through women's eyes by depicting the centrality of domestic production, as you can see in the figure. Total work, as defined in this alternative vision, is the total number of hours spent on production in the domestic sector. It is unpaid care work by members of the household, which is mostly women. NGO sector is also present in the diagram, public sector and private sector. Private sector employment includes formal and informal paid and unpaid work. Public sector employment only consists of formal employment and offers the highest social protection and job security. NGOs are financed by donations and grants and employ both paid employees and unpaid volunteers. The gender division of labor in these four sectors explains relative weakness of women in social, political, and economic life. unpaid care work, volunteer work, informal work, and unpaid work are female intensive. Next slide, please. The field of economics embraces a holistic approach to the reproduction of human beings and other species. The pyramid we see in the figure depicts four spheres that are built upon each other and are in continuous mutual interaction. Each sphere emerges from and relies on the sphere below. Nature is the primary producer of resources for the continuation of human beings and all other species. The production sphere is essentially dependent on the reproduction of the workforce, and the financial sector rises upon the accumulation of capital generated by the production sector. Finance and production are monetized, and reproduction and nature remain in the non-monetized sphere. Conventional economics analyzes only the monetized spheres, whereas feminists describe economics as a discipline concerned with all four spheres. They maintain that each sphere functions in its own time frame. The circulation in finance is much faster compared to the production sphere. Reproduction has three dimensions: daily reproduction, generational reproduction, and biological reproduction. Each one features a different time dimension, with production by nature and its own reproduction occurring over the greatest time span. Harmonization of four spheres in terms of their time cycles and resources is necessary to prevent conflicts that could lead to crisis. For example, when the production sphere does not leave enough time for reproduction, the outcome is a crisis of care. Another example occurs when production takes place beyond what nature can observe and leads to ecological crisis. The high valuation of endless consumption is another ideological assumption of mainstream economics that neglects alternative behaviors and ultimately threatens nature and sustainability. Feminist economists advocate for a sustainable and inclusive economics not only to overcome gender inequalities, but also to transform economics into a field that aims for the reproduction and well-being of all species. Thank you. And this, I hope, gave an idea about what feminist economics is claiming. Leticia, I think we can move to Yelda now.
Thank you,
Hi,
Ozge. Yes, please, Yelda.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ozge, for this brief introduction, which is also dealt with in the first module of our lectures, series of lectures in this course. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Where here I'm going to introduce you the content of the course. So we have 9 modules, starting with Introduction to Economics, Introduction to Gender-Aware Economics and Methods of Analysis, Gender and Macroeconomics, Unpaid Work, Employment, Decent Work and Social Protection, Gender, Income Inequality and Poverty, Gender, Public Finance and Investing for Gender Equality, Gender, Trade and Value Chains, and finally, Economic Policy Making and the Sustainable Development Goals and how to reach those goals. So these topics will be the major modules of the course. And in gender, after Ozge's brief introduction, I want to give a few briefing in the content of each topic. So in the gender-aware economics and methods of analysis, we present the theoretical and methodological contributions of gender-aware economics. It provides an overview of the story of how women's inclusion in economics has evolved into feminist economics and the data-related challenges in the time period. Gender and macroeconomics module. In this module, we assess macroeconomic indicators, mainstream macroeconomic framework of policymaking, along with various critics of it within the heterodox approaches. We provide gendered critique with a special emphasis on distributive impact of macroeconomic outcomes and policies by gender and class. We also discuss the impact of gender inequality on macroeconomic outcomes. In unpaid work, we introduced the extensive body of research and policy debates on unpaid work and the care economy. The module presents the definition, measurement, and evaluation of caring labor with a focus on time use data. The second part turns to policy discussions at intergovernmental and national levels. In the following Employment, Decent Work and Social Protection module, we introduce standard market indicators from a critical gender and human development perspective, followed by a discussion of indicators of gender inequalities in markets and their underlying structural causes. We also discuss social protection systems and reflect gender gaps in social security and related policy debates. Gender income inequality and poverty module presents the concepts and measures of income inequality and poverty. Feminist research has enriched the content and discussions of income inequality and poverty, departing from one-dimensional measures based on income and develop new and extended measures from the perspective of human well-being. We also discuss how an inclusive growth framework addresses poverty. In the following Gender, Public Finance and Investing for Gender Equality, we spotlight the role of public finance and fiscal policy in reducing, creating, and reinforcing inequalities, particularly gender inequalities. We show that fiscal policy can promote inclusive growth through reducing inequality and poverty. However, the ability and effectiveness of public policies depends in large part on whether a country has a fiscal space. Also in this module, we present gender-responsive budgeting as a tool to support a more equitable society. In the Gender, Trade and Value Chains module, we focus on the impact of developments in trade and trade liberalization on gender inequalities and the effect of gender inequalities on trade outcomes. The module discusses links between trade and gender inequalities through employment, paid and unpaid work, wages, and poverty outcomes. And finally, overall policymaking and the sustainable development goals module presents the vision and main characteristics of the 17 sustainable development goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by world leaders in September 2015. The module places a special focus on SDG 5 on gender equality and questions the compatibility of the overall macroeconomic framework of the goals to promote inclusive growth and also question of centrality of financing to reach those goals. Leticia, can we move on to the next slide? As you have seen, this is quite an intensive course, but at the end of this course, the expected outcomes are following. We expect the participants to integrate the principles and contributions of feminist methodology into the policy making of practitioners to improve the effectiveness of policy designs and implementations. We expect the participants to be competent in macroeconomics and particularly the gender critics of mainstream economics, regarding especially the distributive impact of macroeconomic outcomes. Participants are expected to consider inequalities in unpaid and paid work as an issue of inclusive growth and human development. And we expect them to engage in related policy debates on unpaid work with a particular focus on strategies of recognition, reduction, and redistribution of unpaid work. Some more of the intended outcomes are the participants to be familiar with gender assessment tools and instruments used in fiscal policy design and implementation, assess the link between trade and gender inequalities within the context of global value chains to suggest gender equitable macro policies, and overall understand the importance of addressing gender equality as a standalone objective and how to mainstream gender equality across the 2030 agenda. And we expect the participants to be able to address the importance of a compatible macroeconomic policy framework, adequate financing, and monitoring to enable the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This completes my presentation of the webinar. Leticia.
Thank you so much, Ozge. So now we go to Clemencia for some notes on the logistics.
Thank you very much, Yelda and Ozge, for the presentation. Just a few words about the workshop in itself, the training. This training on gender and economics is intended to provide intermediate level training to development practitioners, including governments and policy and program staff in international development organizations. As was said, the overall objective is to strengthen the capacity of technical advisors and program staff on the importance of gender responsive policy. This course was already piloted in 2017 and peer reviewed by several UN Women sections, among which, under the leadership of Economic Empowerment section, the UN Women Training Center, the UN Women Regional Advisors for Asia Pacific and Europe and Central Asia. The face-to-face modality course, as you may already know, will take place from June 25 to 29 in Turin at the ITC-ILO Training Center. And all participants should register before 6 May. This is next Sunday. So this is, in fact, the last week for registration. To apply, please go to the portal, which is in the screen, trainingcenterunwomen.org portal, and select the course from the list of courses and fill out the registration form online. The UN Women Training Center team will get back to you as soon as the selection process is finalized, which will be by the end of next week. Just to finalize, we expect that potential attendees meet the following criteria: demonstrated knowledge of economics, and a commitment to attend all 5 days on the face-to-face training session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clemencia, Yelda, and Ozge, for your wonderful presentation. Now, just a quick reminder to participants that we still have a little time for them to pose some questions. I'm going to put now on screen the ones that already reached us, and I'm going to read the first one for you. It says, feminist economics attributes differences between the actions of men and women in the economy to institutions, or to different forms of rationality, or to which cause? This question is from Ana Salazar. So, Ozge and Yelda, feel free to reply.
Feminist economics, yes, attributes differences between actions of men and women in the economy, both due to the gender roles that they adopt since their birth, but also since all institutions, meaning the labor market, the government, all policies, economic theory and assumptions the policies are based on, are also gendered. Economics assumes that people are rational and they make choices knowing the consequences of their actions by valuing their cost of their actions with the benefit of actions. and hence we are free to choose based on our resources. Feminist economists say that men and women do not have access to same resources and cannot exercise their rights equally. Hence, the choices available out there are actually in real life, in reality, are not equally available to both genders, and therefore the free choice argument does not work in real life. And yes, men and women are different, yet they need to be equally represented in economics. That what is feminist economics is about. Therefore, both priorities of men and women, their constraints, men's and women's different constraints should be integrated to the policy making processes to reach actually real equality between men and women.
Thank you so
I
much.
hope
So,
this answered the question of Anna. Thank you, Anna,
of
for your question.
course. So there's another question by Anna, and it says, is there a preoccupation in feminist economics about the participation of women in economics as a discipline?
Yes, definitely there is this priority, as in many areas in economics, from micro realm to macro realm, women are underrepresented, or they have carrying, they are affected differently from the outcomes of policy making because of the already different social roles in their society. Is there's the labor, the discrepancies in macroeconomics or economics in general in terms of gender uh, is huge in labor markets, in labor market segmentations, in the choice of women, in the choice of women's employment in works, or even in the fiscal policy, where fiscal policy is supposedly formulated according to a neutral citizen, whereas the outcomes on different genders, that is men and women, are different because of their different accesses to the public resources. So about the participation of women in economics, it's a very big issue. Participation in economics, we mean women as active agents being unequal, to be able to make disadvantaged women to be on equal grounds with men in their access to resources, to be equal on grounds for decision making in micro or macroeconomic policy frameworks. So in that sense, feminist economics shows the discrepancies, tries to formulate the policy making from the perspective of eradicating inequalities in the society, not only pertaining to women and women and men discrepancies, that is discriminations, but other class, race inequalities as well. Thank you, Anna.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next question is, how do we achieve gender equal pay when top rich people are white men? It's from Thao Li Duan Wu. So about equal pay.
Yes, equal pay. Thank you, Tao. Yeah, as the policy proposal, what feminist economists are arguing for is actually for the sake of gender equality, the policies that could be implemented for equal pay are making legislations more strict about gender equal pay and discrimination. And moreover, the gender segmentation should be overcome in employment, which actually veils the gender inequality in pay and in access to trainings or benefits and etc. But the question asks something else. It is asking how we're going to achieve gender equal pay when top rich people are all white men, by advocacy, by organizing, and by I think raising our voice of alternatives for equality is obviously a way to move forward. And another way is also by presenting arguments against how actually we are losing some of the resources that could be allocated more efficiently in mainstream terms in the economy by actually imposing gender discrimination in the economy, because this unequal pay is resulting with maybe losing some of the qualified women workforce or the potential women workforce from the labor market, and then we are not using the full potential of human resources in the economy. This is this is maybe a way to talk to conventional economists, but also there's an ethical and political path to follow based on raising our voices for gender equality, which is a concern for itself. Thank you again for Tao's question.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So our next question is, what is the difference between gender economics and feminist economics? This is from Belén Sobrino. So maybe you can quickly review that again. I believe it would be Ozge. Thank you.
I can answer that, but the equal inheritance right, there was a question about number 4.
Apologies, you're right. So let me read that first. It's from Manhuma Akar Musumi, and it says, how equal inheritance right can be linked to feminist economics? Thank you.
All of the questions so far are very good questions, and they are tough questions, I must admit. So these are all things to be discussed maybe in the course content in June, this year in June. So about disproportionate ownership of women and their unequal shares in inheritance is a big problem, which has its root not only in institutional rights, in institutional frameworks, but also cultural and patriarchal roots that it has, making the women having less access to those equal inheritance rights. So it's a part of feminist economics agenda, not only to increase asset ownership, but they're not on the same terms, but not only to increase the asset ownership, but also to change the frameworks which makes the women have less access to those rights. So feminist economics strives for and the struggle is for to make women's disadvantaged position to change in a way that we try to enhance their capabilities sets, that is their opportunities and their access to those rights. It's definitely a part of the feminist economics agenda, and it can be dealt in the fiscal policy making framework as well, not only on legal fronts, but in terms of fiscal policy formulations and designs. These questions can be addressed at those fronts. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you so much. We're going now with what is the difference between gender and economics, with gender economics and feminist economics, from Belén Sobrino.
To answer Belén Sobrino's question, the terms that are often used all along the training, gender, what is gender, gender equality, sex, feminism, production, reproduction, maybe defining that will be useful. Gender is defined as all the social constructed values and behaviors imposed on man and women sexes. And so what feminist economics is aiming for is to address these gendered behaviors which are assumed, which are imposed on both men and women and are harmful for both genders in terms of realizing all their human potentials, because they're constrained by those gender roles. So feminist economics is related to feminism in that respect, which is a movement trying to liberate women primarily, but also men from the constraints these gender roles bring to their lives. And so what I would say is, doing gender economics, we are actually looking at those differences between men and women and how their gender roles determine the way they participate in the economy. And feminist economics is actually doing analysis based on this, doing this gendered economics analysis, and with the aim of actually getting rid of those gender roles and trying to liberate both sexes and transform all the way in which economic theory policy is made to provide equal access to resources for both men and women. I hope this explains.
That's great, Ozge. Thank you so much. So we go on with a couple of questions that has to do with the logistics of the training. We have number 6, who is going to bear the cost of face-to-face training in the proposed date? And also, they are asking, several people are asking for clarifying the registration deadlines and the dates of the training. So cost and registration deadline and dates of the training. If you can clarify this, Clemencia, please.
Yes, the costs have to be borne by each participant. The cost of the fee, there is a fee to the course, which is 2,500 for the 5 days. And there is the additional costs, which is the tickets and per diems, which also have to be borne by the participants. The registration deadline is Sunday, May 6th, which is this Sunday. So you still have 4 days, 4 to 5 days to register. And the face-to-face is, the course will take place from June 25 to 29, which is a full week, Monday to Friday of June this year.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So yes, please bear in mind that you have until this Sunday to register to the course. And I also wanted to thank all participants because we're having an amazing amount of questions and very interesting ones. Unfortunately, we are reaching to the end of our presentation, And then we will focus on these two final questions that are related to gender, to care work. So just wanted to say quickly that please feel free to send your questions once the webinar has ended through email. We can respond some more questions through email. So I'm going with number 8 now. It says, my question is related to women being responsible for care work and pressure to seek professional work at the same time and not sequentially like men. What is being studied in feminist economics to close these gaps? Is from Alejandra Bersky. And I would like to read number 9 as well, because I believe it is related. In the macroeconomic analysis, how has the work of care been integrated? It's from Maria Bastidas. So please, Ozge and Yelda, feel free to reply.
Okay, let me start. Maybe Ozge can follow after me the spaces that I left untouched. So this question is very central to the feminist studies or gender studies, gender economics studies, because to eradicate the labor market discrepancies, at the first place, the feminist economists advocate work-life balance policies to be a priority area of policy in the intervention for gender equality. That is, in order to achieve work-life balance, in the sense that the question is raised, many things have to be done, including access to affordable care services for children, elderly, ill, and those living with disabilities. But also labor market regulations has to be reformulated and established in such a way to ensure decent work. And it's not only these things to be done, but institutional, and the feminist economics have been working a great deal in this topic of work-life balance and how to make women available, more participate in the same grounds as men. And it's not, these are only some of the things that comes to my mind to say that feminists are using studying in the area. They are studying to make legal frameworks, the labor conditions conducive for women to participate, starting with the household and reproductive activities that is predominantly the responsibility of women. In that sense, the legal framework has to be reassessed, and women and all people who are ready to participate in labor markets has to be prepared to enter in those markets through labor market policies. And I think I will stop now. Maybe I will follow later on in the ninth question after Ozge's points, if she has.
Okay, thank you, Yelda. To answer question 8 by Alejandra, I would say a huge concern for women's labor market participation is actually persistent division of labor in the household, which still leaves the care burden mostly on women. And it is very hard to change the gender division of labor in the household. Yet, what can be done and this leads to time poverty for women actually. And what can be done to change this is we need to reconsider the division of labor in the household. We have to change it, and to be able to do this, being a parent should be on the central a point of policy making, and instead of just giving the care responsibility to mother, it should be parental leave, and it should be forced for men to exercise in order to be able to benefit from parental leaves. Fathers should be also taking part in care responsibility. Working hours need to be lower for both genders to be able to basically continue to care for their children and elderly and to avoid care crisis, because nowadays what we're facing is the working hours are long and the care there's no one to care, because women also have to be in the labor market because of the income constraints and overall, when we look at who will care, then in the absence of social care facilities, we face a crisis of care. To avoid this, we need to have lower working hours, parental leave, and reachable and logistically reachable and affordable social childcare for all. And those are the four most important policies that should be applied. And I think that would be my answer briefly to question 8. Shall we move to question 9 since it is also related? Yelda, shall I continue with 9?
If you wish, I can then comment.
In the macroeconomic analysis, how has the work of care been integrated? I tried to give a flavor of the framework feminist economics has in the circular flow diagram. In the previous, in the 2 slides that we shared with you, the first one was the conventional textbook circular flow diagram, in which households were the source of factors of production like labor, land, capital, and entrepreneurship. Yet, labor was treated like any other factor of production. However, labor needs to be reproduced, and the feminist version that we presented was also putting this in the picture, and actually was not only putting that in the picture, but also was addressing it as a central part of the economy, because the division between reproduction and production in the current economics field is a synthetic division. Production is totally dependent on reproduction, and in the patriarchal system where we have women in the reproductive sphere mostly doing care work and reproduction of all the necessary services and goods with unpaid labor is based on the gender inequality. And so women remain working for meeting people's needs, yet women are remaining needy in this way we vision the economy. And macroeconomics is taking a whole different angle and is trying to change that the gender roles can move, and when we move them, we will allow both genders to participate in the reproduction and in the production equally. And we are using different measures. We are addressing different ways of policy making in addressing those issues. For example, just to give an example, for poverty analysis, recently an author of this training manual, Emel Memiş, and her colleagues from Levy Institute in Bard College. They developed an indicator called time and income poverty, which addresses the interaction between the unpaid and paid work together, and how actually they together affect the level of poverty in the household. When we neglect the role of that unpaid work, we are actually not really assessing the wealth and the well-being of people in the household, because we are overlooking all the goods and services they consume thanks to the unpaid labor. And by putting that into the picture, they actually provided a more complete perspective of economics. That is just to give an example of many other things that feminist economists are trying to propose to change economics for and economics for all. I hope this answers Maria's questions. I will let Yelda to complete if she has any other things to.
Thank you very much. I think I will add only a very few points. It's also on the theoretical grounds that feminists integrate care. For example, feminist questions the gendered outcome of macroeconomic changes, and especially in today's world, when the approach of macroeconomic approach is to follow precautionary macroeconomic policies involving budget cuts or reduction in public spending. This has direct implications, which is empirically verified by feminist economists, which has direct implications for reduction in the quantity and quality of public services, and which the beneficiaries proportionately are women regarding their roles as primary family caregivers. This is another example, for example. Or again, with the cuts in budget or with the cuts in public spending, we see an increase in women's unpaid work, as Ozge mentioned, which is also verified by time use data. All the macroeconomic policies can be evaluated through the perspective of gender implications, men and women. And when we look behind the usual way of implementing macroeconomics, behind the curtains or behind the veil, we see really different implications, starting from inflation to monetary policies, from monetary policies to tax implications. So central is the unremunerated, neglected, or not sufficiently addressed care work and reproductive activities at home. And there's a lot of work going on empirically, theoretically in this area. Thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you so much, Yelda and Ozge, for your responses and explanations. We only have a few minutes left. If you have any final remarks, or Clemencia, if you want to say something to finalize.
No, thank you. We hope you enjoy and register. We hope to see you in Turin.
That's excellent. So I just wanted to say thank you all so much for this introduction to gender and economic, and as well thank you all for attending and sending your questions today. Please remember that this webinar has been recorded, and that it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and also that you can contact us at info.trainingcenter@unwomen.org at any time, and also check our complete catalog of courses at trainingcenter.unwomen.org. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Ozge. Thank you.
Thank you very much.